Did you smoke pot today, this day?
Sure. Yeah.
You did, before you came here?
Yeah.
So you
Do what?
have pot in you right now?
Yeah. You could arrest me.
Willie Nelson isn't just a country icon. He is a living testament to struggle, survival, and the unyielding fire of an outlaw spirit. For more than 7 decades, his voice has carried across endless highways and broken hearts, giving the world songs like Blue Eyes, Crying in the Rain, and On the Road Again. Songs that felt like freedom. Songs that felt like home. But behind that unmistakable smile and bandana lies a man who has endured storms darker than the spotlight ever revealed. Failed marriages that left him shattered, financial ruin that nearly stole everything he had built, a devastating loss that no father should ever endure. And now, at 92, the weight of those tragedies lingers heavier than ever, casting a shadow over the final chapter of his journey. He has carried burdens that would have broken lesser men, reshaping every wound into a melody and every failure into a story worth telling. Yet behind the music lies a silence that few ever hear, the toll of debts, betrayals, and unbearable loss. It is in that silence where the real Willie Nelson lingers, and it is there that his most haunting truths remain. So don't look away, because what lies ahead is not just the story of a musician, it is the story of survival itself. And if Willie's music has ever moved you, if his voice has ever carried you through a storm, then leave a like on this video as a tribute to the man who gave the world everything and still hasn't stopped giving. Abbott, Texas, April 29, 1933. The Great Depression was in full force, and survival was never promised. Families clawed for every penny, every meal, every ounce of stability. It was into this unforgiving world that Willie Hugh Nelson was born. Abbott was a speck of a town, surrounded by cotton fields and dirt roads that stretched on like the endless burden of poverty. In Abbott, you worked or you starved, and children were no exception. Willie's childhood was marked not by comfort, but by absence. His father, Ira, left early, unable to hold the family together under the crushing weight of hardship. His mother, Myrle, soon followed, searching for something she couldn't find at home. By 9 years old, Willie and his sister Bobby were orphans in all but name, raised by their grandparents, Alfred and Nancy. The Nelsons had little to give but faith and discipline. Sundays were spent in the Abbott Methodist Church, where hymns filled the air. For Willie, those hymns became more than music. They were survival. He learned that a song could lift a heavy soul, could carry pain in a way that words alone never could. At 6 years old, his grandfather placed a guitar in his small hands. The strings were rough, the wood worn, but it was salvation. Willie practiced endlessly, strumming until his fingers bled, pouring every ounce of loneliness into his playing. That battered guitar became his first true companion. Even as a boy, Willie knew the sharp sting of abandonment, but instead of turning bitter, he turned tender. His sorrow became empathy. His solitude became music. The fields, the church pews, the long nights of silence, they all became teachers, shaping him into a voice that would one day echo far beyond Abbott. The pain of his early years was not wasted. It became the soil from which his legend would grow. By his teenage years, it was clear that Willie was no ordinary boy. His classmates saw him as quiet, sometimes distant, but whenever he picked up a guitar, they leaned closer. There was a depth in his music that didn't match his age, an ache that seemed borrowed from lives much older. At 13, he wrote his first song. It was simple, but it carried a sadness and honesty that startled those who heard it. Soon he was performing at school dances, church socials, and even in small taverns, where weary farmers and veterans nursed their troubles with beer. For them, the young boy with the guitar wasn't just entertainment. He was a voice that understood their pain. By his mid-teens, Willie was playing with a local polka band. The smoke-filled dance halls were alive with couples twirling under dim lights, their laughter mingling with the sound of Willie's chords. These gigs rarely paid more than a few dollars, or sometimes just a hot meal, but they gave Willie what he craved most, an audience. He also found his way into radio. As a teenage disc jockey, he spun the records of his heroes, Hank Williams, Ernest Tubb, Lefty Frizzle. In between, he slipped in his own homemade demos. His voice, nasal and conversational, wasn't what Nashville thought of as marketable, but it was real, and those who listened closely felt that authenticity. While most of his peers resigned themselves to farming or factory work, Willie chased a dream bigger than Abbott. He wasn't just playing songs, he was building a future. His guitar was more than an instrument. It was a lifeline. His lyrics were more than rhymes. They were confessions. Every chord, every note, every song carried him a step closer to a destiny that even he couldn't yet fully see. Adulthood came quickly. Willie married young, hoping to build the kind of family security he had never known as a child. Soon he was a father, juggling bills and the weight of responsibility. He worked tirelessly, but the jobs never fit him. He tried his hand at everything, selling encyclopedias door to door, trimming trees, even peddling Bibles. But no matter how hard he worked, the money was never enough. Nights became his sanctuary. After the family went to bed, Willie would sit at the kitchen table with pen and paper, writing songs by lamplight. The melodies came as confessions, as prayers, as escapes. His notebooks filled with lyrics that carried longing, regret, and fragile hope. Finally, he made a decision that would change everything. He left Texas behind and went to Nashville. For country musicians, Nashville was the promised land, but it was also a fortress guarded by gatekeepers who had no room for outsiders. When Willie arrived, Nashville didn't know what to do with him. He didn't look the part, didn't sound the part, and didn't conform to their rules. His voice was called too nasal, his phrasing too odd. He was told to cut his hair, to clean up, to fit in, but Willie refused. He knew that conforming would kill the very thing that made his music real. The rejections piled up. He lived in cheap boarding houses, sometimes skipping meals, sometimes wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. But he couldn't stop writing. Dozens of songs poured out of him. Songs that no one wanted yet, but that would one day reshape the heart of country music. Nashville saw only a misfit. What they didn't realize was that they were pushing Willie Nelson toward becoming the very outlaw who would one day tear their system apart. Ironically, Nashville's first acceptance of Willie came not as a performer, but as a songwriter. In 1961, Patsy Cline recorded a ballad he had written, Crazy. The song became an instant classic, a haunting anthem of heartbreak that cemented Willie's reputation as a songwriter of rare genius. More followed. Farron Young recorded Hello Walls, turning it into a hit. Billy Walker sang Funny How Time Slips Away. In a matter of years, Willie went from struggling nobody to one of the most in-demand songwriters in Nashville. But for him, success was bittersweet. He didn't want to live in the shadows of others' voices. He wanted the world to hear his own. When RCA signed him, Willie hoped it was his chance, but his early albums were suffocated by Nashville's heavy hand. Producers layered his music with orchestras and background vocals, burying the raw intimacy of his voice. Audiences didn't connect. Critics dismissed him. To the industry, Willie was a writer, not a star. By the early 1970s, frustration boiled over. He nearly quit music altogether. Instead, he returned to Texas, where the Austin music scene was blossoming. Cowboys, hippies, drifters, all gathered together, united not by image but by authenticity. It was here Willie found freedom. In 1975, he released Red-Headed Stranger, a sparse, unconventional concept album. Critics predicted failure. Instead, it became one of the most important country albums ever made, redefining the genre and proving that raw truth could triumph over polished lies. From there, the hits came fast. Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, Whiskey River, On the Road Again. Willie became the face of outlaw country, alongside Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, and Chris Christopherson. As the Highwaymen, they weren't just musicians. They were rebels, rewriting the rules. But behind the bandana and the outlaw smile, shadows still lingered. Fame was never without its cost. Fame brought Willie Nelson fortune, recognition, and immortality in music. But it also brought chaos, heartbreak, and a darkness that fame only magnified. To the outside world, Willie seemed unstoppable, a smiling outlaw with a bandana and guitar, forever riding the wave of success. Yet behind the scenes, his life was a storm. His marriages told the story of that storm. His first marriage to Martha Matthews was volatile, filled with passion, but marred by turbulence. They clashed, they fought, and eventually they broke. His second marriage to Shirley Colley fared no better, collapsing under the weight of infidelity and the restless pull of the road. His third marriage to Connie Kopke also dissolved, leaving behind more children and more fractured pieces of a family man who wanted to do right but could never outrun the demands of fame. Willie longed for stability, but he was forever in motion, a man married more to the road than to any home. The outlaw lifestyle also came with temptations. Marijuana became synonymous with his name, a part of his public image and his private coping mechanism, but alcohol and other substances followed him too. Nights blurred into mornings. Tours turned into years. The endless cycle of concerts, parties, and long drives left little time for reflection and even less for healing. Then came the IRS scandal, the lowest point of his public life. In 1990, the government accused Willie of owing $32 million in back taxes, the result of mismanagement and failed investments. The punishment was swift and merciless. Federal agents raided his properties, seizing homes, cars, and even recording masters. Willie, the outlaw hero, was suddenly humiliated on the national stage. Most would have crumbled, but Willie fought back the only way he knew how, through music. He recorded the IRS tapes, "Who'll Buy My Memories," and sold it directly to fans, slowly chipping away at the mountain of debt. It was resilience in the face of ruin, but nothing compared to the personal tragedy that followed. In 1991, his son Billy, lost in the grip of depression and addiction, took his own life. Willie was shattered. For all his success, all his fame, he could not save his son. The guilt weighed heavily, and the grief never left him. The loss of Billy was the wound that no song could heal, the scar that still shadows his smile. And yet, in the aftermath of devastation, Willie Nelson found redemption. Amid the chaos of the early 1990s, his financial ruin, his grief, he married Annie D'Angelo. Annie was different from the wives who came before. She was steady, grounded, and patient. She helped Willie rebuild his life from the wreckage. With Annie, Willie finally found the stability that had eluded him for so long. She took charge of finances, helped him manage his affairs, and stood beside him through storms that would have broken most couples. Together, they raised two sons, Lucas and Micah, who inherited their father's love for music and carried forward his legacy in their own ways. Willie also leaned on his friendships. The Highwaymen were more than collaborators. They were brothers. Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, and Chris Christopherson walked with him through the highs and lows, each of them scarred in their own ways. Together, they became a symbol of resilience. Their bond showed the world that legends were not immune to suffering, but that they could survive by leaning on each other. Willie's music also began to shift. Songs like Always on My Mind revealed a man reflecting on mistakes, admitting regrets, and searching for forgiveness. Fans connected to this raw honesty. His concerts became less about performance and more about communion. Audiences didn't just listen, they felt. Willie's willingness to bear his scars made them feel less alone in theirs, and Willie gave back. In 1985, alongside Neil Young and John Mellencamp, he co-founded Farm Aid, a benefit concert to support struggling American farmers. What began as a one-time event became an annual tradition, raising millions and giving voice to those often forgotten. Willie's empathy for the overlooked was no act. It was who he was. Born from the fields of Abbott, Texas, where he had once known hunger himself. Through love, family, friendship, and activism, Willie turned scars into strength. Redemption didn't erase his past, but it gave it purpose. His pain became a bridge that connected him to millions who saw in him not just a legend, but a survivor. Today, at 92, Willie Nelson is both fragile and eternal. His body bears the marks of a lifetime of hard living: collapsed lungs, emphysema, near-fatal bouts of pneumonia. Each time, headlines predicted the end. Each time, Willie returned. As if daring death itself to catch him, he walked back onto stages with guitar in hand, smile in place, and music still pouring from his soul. His voice has changed. Once smoother, it is now cracked and weathered, heavy with years. But in those cracks lies something more powerful than perfection: truth. When Willie sings today, you hear not just melody, but memory. You hear the child abandoned in Abbott, the young man rejected by Nashville, the outlaw who lost everything to the IRS, the father who lost his son. His voice is no longer flawless. It is human, and that humanity makes it timeless. Even now, Willie refuses to slow down. He continues to tour, to record, to stand beneath stage lights and give himself to the crowd. He doesn't do it for money or for fame. He does it because music is his oxygen. To stop would be to surrender, and Willie Nelson has never surrendered. Yet there is tragedy in his endurance. The brothers he once rode with, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, are gone. The outlaw generation has faded into history, and Willie remains the last sentinel carrying their memory with him each time he steps on stage. He is both survivor and mourner, a living monument to an era that changed country music forever. Fans see his smile, hear his jokes, and feel his warmth. But behind it all is the shadow of time, the one enemy no outlaw can defeat. For all his defiance, Willie Nelson is mortal, and the fragility of that truth makes his music now more haunting than ever. Willie Nelson's life has never been about perfection. It has been about endurance. He was the boy abandoned, who found solace in hymns and a cheap guitar. He was the young man rejected, who wrote songs too honest for Nashville to handle. He was the outlaw who rose to fame only to be brought to his knees by debt and tragedy. And he was the father who endured the unthinkable, the loss of a child, yet still carried on. At 92, Willie is not simply surviving. He is bearing witness. His life is testimony that pain can be turned into beauty, that scars can become songs, that broken men can still create something eternal. His story is not about avoiding tragedy. It is about surviving it, transforming it, and leaving behind a legacy built not on perfection, but on perseverance. When you hear Willie sing today, you are not just listening to music. You are listening to the sound of survival itself. You are hearing every heartbreak, every mistake, every loss transformed into melody. And that is why his songs cut so deeply. They remind us of our own scars, and they remind us that we too can endure. So don't just remember Willie Nelson as a legend. Remember him as a man. Remember the child who played hymns in Abbott, the outlaw who stood against Nashville, the survivor who clawed back from ruin, and the father who carried grief that would have silenced most. If this story has moved you, if Willie's music has ever touched your soul, leave a like on this video as a tribute to him. Share his story. Subscribe so his legacy can echo further. Because at 92, Willie Nelson is more than a musician. He is a mirror of our own struggles, proof that beauty can be born from heartbreak. And to witness his tragedy, to sit with his story, is to honor the fragile, relentless beauty of endurance itself.